Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this session. I understand it's just post-lunch, so hopefully we'll keep the energy high and keep you entertained and enthralled by the conversation that's going to follow. And in the absence of that, you might hopefully have some questions for us at the end of the session. So I'll do my brief introduction, then hand over to my esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. Thank you, Henry. As you well know, my name is Imran Hamid. I'm one of the senior investment principals at LifeArc Ventures. We're a UK-based venture fund operating underneath a large medical sciences charity. We invest across the full spectrum of life sciences, so biotherapeutics, health tech, devices, digital, and I myself am a board member of two companies in this space, Affect Therapeutics, based in the US, that specialize in substance use disorder management, and Surgery Hero, who offer services to optimize people's journey through their surgical care. And with that, perhaps I'll hand over to Heather.
Afternoon, everyone. So I'm Heather Roxborough. I'm partner at OSE. So I lead our health tech vertical. We are a venture builder and a Series A to Series D investor in the health tech space. We've got $1 billion under management and have been on the go for about 7 years with 10 portfolio companies, a number of which are in the mental health space.
Thank you very much. Yep, it works. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending the session. My name is Jordi Ferrer. I'm investment director at Ship2B Ventures. Ship2B is an impact venture capital fund based out of Barcelona. Basically, we provide an impact angle to healthcare investments. This means that we are technology agnostic and pathology agnostic. We have identified three vulnerable communities, which are elderly people, people with chronic diseases, and people with impairments, and we invest in solutions that improve quality of life of these communities in an early stage. So we are basically early stage investors from Series C to Series A.
Hello. Hi, hello. I'm Guillem Masferrer. I'm a partner at Asabys Partners. Probably you have heard about Asabys during the morning. We're a VC based in Barcelona, started in 2018 with the idea of investing in health innovation across technologies, across stages, across therapeutic areas. We have a pretty agnostic mindset, and the idea is to find solutions that, in a way, can help patients feel better. We are managing close to 200 million euros across two funds. We're currently fundraising our second fund. And from our first fund, we have several investments that relate to today's topic, a couple of them in the mental health space, some others in the chronic care space. One of them, actually, it's Xavier's company that we're going to be probably discussing a little bit in the coming minutes. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Good afternoon, I'm Xavier Palomer. I'm the founder of Amelia Virtual Care. Although today I'm representing XR Health because we just merged with a US-based company, which, coming from Amelia, coming from Spain, Barcelona, I think is one of the success stories on the digital health environment in Europe, definitely in the southern part of Europe. We have built a virtual reality tool for mental health professionals. We have customers in more than 50 countries, very solid go-to-market strategy, of course, science, clinical validation, etc. And we were lucky enough to partner with some of the funds that are represented here today, and they help us grow the company all the way to become one of the leaders in the world, and making sure and helping us merging with this US-based company. And today I think we can proudly say that thanks to all of us, we are the largest virtual reality therapeutic platform in the world, with a goal of really growing, to grow very, very fast in the coming months, and hopefully, making our investors happy very, very soon.
So thank you for the introductions. And the first question to get us started, I'd love to get your reflections on what do you personally look for in potential companies in this space in terms of things that excite you, things that you think may help differentiate businesses you may be investing or operating? And do you think there's opportunities to do more than just having a single technological approach, for example, combining technological approaches? Heather, perhaps if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think for us, what we're really looking for is not just the technology, but a clear understanding of what the value proposition and the commercial model is. I think oftentimes we are not good at doing that at a seed stage. So I think for a company to really stand out, they think about that from the start. I think personally, I'm also keen to understand what their go-to-market is, not just in the UK and Europe, but also US. I think the US market is much bigger, and we're seeing companies thrive there. And it's interesting to see that Amelia has also gone there as well for that reason. So I think that's the second element. And I think the third is we're trying to avoid point solutions. So we've seen, I think the first wave in digital health was very much point solution based. And I think now the customers are looking for platforms. That's platforms that will succeed. So we're looking to see opportunities that have the potential to extend across multiple use cases and give a platform position.
Thank you.
Yeah, from our side, very similar. I would say that we mainly look at two things, and both are equally important and kind of contradictory. First of all, it's a strong clinical validation, and this, of course, is expensive. The other part of it is good commercial traction, or at least some commercial traction. And this is probably the most difficult part because it's a kind of a gray area. The market access is not so clear, and we are seeing nowadays some companies that are not succeeding in their business model. So we only look for these companies that are able to succeed in both. Probably the most successful ones are the ones that are either able to prove good evidence as a standalone by themselves, but we are identifying also many of them that can be also a co-treatment with other existing drugs. So.
Thank you. And Guillem?
Just trying to extend a little bit I definitely agree with both of them. Probably, at least the way of doing things that we have at Asabys, we always try to ground our investment decisions on it needs to be a real impact on patients. So the evidence, the clinical and medical evidence, it's fundamental for us. However, it's true that with the different range of technologies currently available, there might be different ways of making therapies accessible for patients. And this is something that we always try to find which would be the best mix of the evidence that it's there in the market, or the evidence that the scientific teams in our companies are doing, together in finding a way in making this a real solution that it's actionable for patients, for professionals, and to get inside the whole complicated healthcare ecosystem in a way that it's obviously at the end turning into some financial results for us as investors. No? So it's a complicated mix. It's many things that come together. But yeah, that's what we are most interested in.
And Guillem, a follow-up question, if I may. There are a number of different solutions that have already hit this sort of space over the years. Do you think there's room for new companies, or do you think it's a case of companies that exist now proving they have the ability to scale?
That's a great question. And all of us as investors, we receive many deal flow opportunities constantly. We see a lot of things that are kind of copycats or try to replicate some other, more or less successful solution that has happened, for instance, in one geography and replicated in another. We see this all the time. It's true that the largest players currently, the ones that have a platform with different products, let's say across therapeutic areas or across indications, are the ones that might be, from an economies of scale point of view, easier for them to get successful. But it's true that sometimes just focusing into developing one product the right way might be able to make that team capable of creating the best solution out there. No? So I think it's a combination to be open to new technologies, point solution technologies, but always having the mindset that probably without a platform, it's very complicated to scale.
Great, thank you. And Xavier, your thoughts on that space and how you achieve that? Obviously, as the only operator on the panel.
Yeah, I think, healthcare is a very complicated market. You need to do the clinical validation, as they said. You need to go through the regulatory aspect. With that, you just have the development phase, right? Then you need to go to the market and convince providers to somehow use or prescribe your product, whatever you want, and finally patients to use it, right? So it's a four, if you want to simplify, it's a four-step process. So it's very complicated, and you need to be successful in all of them. You cannot fail in any, right? So it's, but at the end, the end goal is to actually help patients. And to help patients, you need to have everything, but having a very solid go-to-market, right? So from an operator perspective, you need to think on the platform endpoint, different ways on approaching the problem, but you need to have in mind also that you need to be successful in these 4 stages, right? And when you talk to investors, you need to make sure that this is somehow explained easily, because as they said, they look at a lot of decks every day. So it needs to be simplified and explained very, very easily to make sure that everyone is on the same page, right?
And Xavier, but following up on Heather's comment, talking about the merits of a platform-based solution versus a more siloed approach, what were your thoughts when going through that sort of process, particularly the experience at Amelia Care? Were you conscious of that, and did you have a preferred view or a strong view on one versus the other?
Since day one, we bet on the platform approach. Yeah. And actually, the merge that we just did with XR Health, it's also a validation of that, right? To give you a short answer to that, when you talk to a customer, a hospital, a clinic, or healthcare provider, and you come from the virtual reality space, if you have a solution, let's say they want to treat mental health, physical therapy, like different conditions or areas. If they want to treat all of these different conditions with virtual reality, and you don't have a platform approach, they will need to be dealing with, like, let's say you have 5 vendors, 5 hardwares, 5 headsets, 5 logins, 5 invoices, 5 customer service, 5 blah, blah, blah. That makes their life more complicated, right? And as a technology or a product provider, you don't want to make the life of customer more complicated, right? So following this, I think it makes it makes a lot of sense to actually come to the provider, to the end client, saying, I'm a platform, and if you work with me, you are going to have a solution for A, B, C, D, etc., right? Yeah. But you need to keep in mind that focus is important, so you cannot be everything but nothing, So although I think it's better for the customer, in our case, the healthcare provider, it's more complicated internally, right? Because where is the focus, right?
Yeah. And Heather, just reflecting on that, do you have a view on what looks good from a differentiation or defensibility perspective in this space? As we said, there are a lot of companies that look very similar at face value. What sort of techniques or what sort of propositions have you seen that make you think, oh, okay, that's a really unique approach, and how to create that differentiation, defensibility?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. So I think we're actually seeing a lot of Me Too's to the panelist point. So a lot of companies are focused on lower acuity, anxiety, mild depression, and I think it's very hard now to differentiate there. They have tried to differentiate around ways to get better therapists and platforms, around some business models, but I think it's actually very challenging. I think where now we're seeing differentiation is in the higher acuity opportunities, so in severe mental illness, where the need is very strong, there's a bit of white space. We're also seeing it in some what I would call more niche indications. So we have recently invested in a company focused on binge eating, which might appear small, but actually is a chronic condition with 4 million sufferers in the US, but one actually that's very poorly served. We're seeing it the same in the rise in the autism space, in children's mental health. So I think there's opportunities to extend into areas where actually there's a very large underserved market. I think what we need to do is stay away now from the wellness, anxiety, lower acuity opportunities, which are just flooded. And it's very hard to see how you can have something that's differentiated.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jordi, just following on from that comment, certainly I've seen companies who've got a mixture of technology. So it's not only just a healthcare service, but maybe they might have a digital therapeutic, possibly a medical device. They may prescribe sort of treatments. Do you have a view on whether that way of differentiation is helpful, or do you think that just creates more noise in the market?
I think differentiation is critical and is very connected to what Xavier was saying. So the fact of having a platform gives you the opportunity to leverage on this platform to be able to have specific products that differentiate to each other. For instance, we have portfolio company that is exclusively focused on psycho-oncology, right? So it's focused on psychological symptoms for oncology patients. And this is a niche per se that provides huge therapeutic benefit to these type of patients. If you don't differentiate yourself, then you end up with more generic solutions that provide less value to specific conditions. You're not able to help them as much because you are not connected as much to their real needs or their real pains.
And again, just reflecting on that differentiation, one of the key things we're looking for as investors is how to scale these businesses. I wonder, Guillem, you have a view on what you've seen work well to scale these businesses and whether there are preferred business models that you get more excited about and are attracted to as an investor?
So I think again it would depend on the vertical or the industry itself. No, at the end, I'm just reflecting a little bit on my colleagues' comments. I think it's very important to identify what's the real problem that you're trying to solve as a company or as a product. I think just focusing maybe on the mental health space. No, in a current world in which 2 out of 3 people or 60% of the global workforce suffers from some sort of mental health problem. Being able to understand how can there be real therapies or real impact for those people suffering with technology or with products that might be out there in the market, I think that's critical. Finding the way of matching this gap or bridging this gap between supply and demand. No? For us, we are all the time trying to find or trying to invest in companies that in a way try to solve these kind of problems. Not more of you can get super creative in trying to find a very interesting or breakthrough business model or go-to-market strategy, but if the reality proves that you can be able to place your solution into the final user or patient, that's what we are most interested about.
Sure. And I know some businesses, they typically tend to work directly or compete against existing providers to try and get primary reimbursement from a payer. Others try to work with the provider and effectively help them sort of resell their services. Do you have a view on whether one is better than the other or a preference in sort of what approach might be more scalable?
I mean, obviously, investors or people coming from the traditional healthcare space, reimbursement is such a milestone. I mean, being able to get your solution directly reimbursed and doctors to be able to prescribe without affecting the pocket of patients, this is obviously a grail. No? However, it's complicated. I'm not just thinking on the more digital solutions, the path, the regulatory path and let's say the clinical and regulatory development that companies need to do in order to get that, it's still unclear, and we might be almost 8 to 10 years into this market, and nobody has been able to kind of crack the code. So again, it all depends on, I mean, we like to think in a flexible way in this regard, trying to find a way that a solution is really available for patients. Let's find a way to do that, but that would depend company on company, in my view.
If I may, just to add some thoughts to it. So I do agree completely with you, Guillem, and I do agree that we are, I don't know if 8 to 10 years, but far from getting this sector established. But I always think of, so we were just mentioning before, the clinical evidence that we are requiring for this type of solutions. I'm talking digital now. You just mentioned the staging where we are in terms of getting reimbursement. As you said, it's great. But there's a huge difference compared to other sectors such as life sciences or molecules, which is patentability and protection, which digital, on one side, it's unfortunately doesn't have it because it doesn't have this protection, therefore you cannot charge that much. On the other side, it's better, or it should be better for the patients because it provides equity and accessibility for patients. So the question, I have a question here for you, is that are we really going to see a reimbursement market for digital solutions, or will we have new partnerships or new channels that are going to end up providing these solutions to patients? Because I really wonder.
I wish I knew the answer. I don't know. I think it's, what it's undeniable is that digital technologies have proven to improve the access to therapies for patients. I think this is something that all of us are seeing every day. Whether this is going to turn into something that could be patentable, reimbursable, I don't know. But I think that by proving that these technologies can really impact the health of people in the long term, this is going to count in one way or another. But I don't have an answer, unfortunately.
And Javier, just reflecting on that same conversation, are there things that you feel that you've done well at Amelia Virtue Care that, in retrospect, you hadn't expected? You know, there were surprises to you on the journey, and in retrospect, are there things you might have done differently to get that reimbursement or commercial adoption more quickly?
That's the question, right? It's I mean, what we've seen lately, and you've seen the different IPOs that we see in the space lately, the go-to-market, I mean, you can get the reimbursement, you can get the code, or you can get whatever formality you want, but that's not the end goal, right?
Yeah.
You have a long path, and we've seen companies, you know, failing with lots of resources, failing in that stage, right? So digital health, I think we still need to find our way, you know, and reimbursement is what has been there forever. And eventually this will evolve for digital health, right? I think, you know, if you prove that you have a therapeutic value, so you can improve the patient, whatever, somehow, this has a value, right? How do we pay for, because at the end of the day, we are for-profit organizations. A startup is a business, right? So we need to generate revenue, we need to generate profit, right? Is reimbursement the only path? Well, today, yes. Is it working? Well, there are a lot of question marks there. In our case, we've been, you know, trying to do this reimbursement path forever in a lot of different ways. Bottom up, top down, bottom up, so creating your own codes, talking to wherever you need to talk to create your own code, using existing codes to get paid, or to get to allow our customers, therapists, to get paid when using our tool. It has been easy, no? It's smooth. It's a solid path that is going to work for everyone in the future. I don't think so. It's the only thing that we have today. I think so as well. So I think in digital health, we really need to have, and in mental health specifically, you know, a strong focus on how to build businesses out of a digital solution, right? And when you ask for what's the difference, or how do you differentiate your product company from other out there? I think today, honestly, the only answer, I don't think it's IP, I don't think it's technology, I think it's having a solid go-to-market. No one has proved in the world to have a solid go-to-market in digital health, right? So the first one that kind of achieved that somehow, I think that's going to be a game changer, right? We've seen a lot of models, reimbursement, like paper, value-based care, like different ways, right? But I think in the future, 1, 2, 3, 10 years, I don't know, but the real difference is going to be the go-to-market, right?
Yeah. Heather, I see you reaching for your microphone. It looks like you've got something to add there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important point, right? So I think it's actually no cookie-cutter approach to market access for digital health products in the US. And so we see in reimbursement one route. It's a really tough one. Like, companies are struggling. We saw with Ferrer and Achille and others. I mean, it is not easy. We're seeing actually quite a bit of creativity and innovation in the business models. We're seeing some companies thinking about selling to self-insured employers as a health tech service rather than as a product. We're seeing others going as a pseudo provider, as an in-network provider, selling to, again, to payers. And it just seems to be that the companies in this space, they're not. Whenever you ask, like, what is the key, what's the best approach, there is no one best approach. And I think it depends on what your product is, who your customer is, and then you just have to innovate around it. And for some of the companies, actually, they have 2 or 3 different commercial models that they're actually running in parallel, because they can't, you know, figure that out either. So I think it's going to be an interesting one, but somehow I suspect that reimbursement is going to be one of the toughest paths.
Yeah, and this wasn't mentioned in the introduction, but I know in a previous life you were at Optum, and I'm curious from that perspective, when you think about exit or strategic interest from potential acquirers, at what stage do you think companies become attractive, and how do they optimize their sort of ability to look attractive for an exit?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it depends on who the exit is to. So if it's to a US health insurer, I think it's really clear. You just have to have very strong ROI data to show that you can significantly reduce the total cost of care in a population that they really care about. So if it's a big cost burden to the insurer and you have a path to actually reduce that cost, that's the driver. I think it's very different if it's pharma as an acquirer or med tech. We're seeing some provider acquisitions, but less of those. I think most of the big exits we have seen actually in the US in the digital health space has primarily been, if not IPO, but to US insurers based on that ROI data.
And do you think there's an opportunity, and question for anyone on the panel, that there might be a roll-up sort of play here whereby it's not natural that necessarily insurers or providers themselves are acquiring it, but secondary growth funds or private equity funds will step in this space to do consolidation. Do you feel that's a possibility or any signs that may be happening? Jordi?
I personally think so, and we are already seeing it in certain fields. For instance, in imaging, diagnostic imaging, we are seeing already some consolidation, probably more expected. And going back to the beginning, right? If we're talking platforms, definitely they will need to be consolidated.
Yeah. And do you think there are cultural limitations, particularly in the mental health or chronic disease space, that may make it harder to do those roll-ups? Again, thinking about people's own perception of their disease, how that sits within them as an individual, their community, society as a large. Do you think there might be some barriers there for mental health that make it harder to roll up across borders? I don't know if anyone has experience of companies operating across multiple jurisdictions where they've sensed that or seen that, be it language or cultural barriers. And anyone can answer that question.
I think that's an outstanding question. I would tend to say yes, of course, that there are natural barriers for these solutions, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. It made me pause to think.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of portfolio companies that has gone from European markets to the US, and I've seen vice versa. And actually, the core product is largely the same because the core problem's largely the same. There has to be some, UX, UI adaptation, but actually the problem experienced by the patient, I think, is the same across the board. And so if you can get that, the user experience and the engagement, I guess, adjusted for the cultural variation, then I think that's fine.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question.
Javier, or
yeah, maybe just to build on that, because I was thinking that it's a paradox that happens all the time in the healthcare space, that sometimes even if you prove that a solution can be really improving life of people, health of people, at the end of the day, being a company producing that solution does not depend merely on that in order to be successful. You need to get through different complexity across geographies with the different healthcare ecosystems, the different reimbursement schemes or payers, providers, hospitals. So at the end, you can even have the best product in the world, and there is all the evidence supporting that this is the best thing that you can give to a patient, and it might not be enough. No? So we live in this world, this is how we do, and we need to navigate each of these complexities every day.
I think to add to that, just remember when Facebook Meta was created, right? They had no revenue, they had no business model at all. The goal there was a common trend in the digital health, in the digital world, like just reach this like massive market, and then you will figure out how to make money out of it, right? Maybe in healthcare, no. What we are trying to do is like generate some kind of value, because Facebook had some value at that time. We were all in Facebook, right? Maybe not today, but some days ago. So they had some value, right? And at the end, they found a way to monetize it, which today is like ads, publicity, right? Maybe healthcare is not a good example, right? But at the end, what I'm trying to say is that we know that we are generating value, right? For the patient, for the provider, for the community, we don't really know how to monetize that, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge, right? And regarding the regulatory aspect on that, it's difficult to build this value on different geographies with different regulatory landscapes, healthcare systems, and try to create value everywhere without a clear monetization process, go-to-market business model you mentioned, right? So I think we are kind of facing that situation today, especially in mental health, right? We've seen a big change in mental health in the last 3 years since COVID. But we are still way behind other like healthcare areas, right?
Any questions for me? I've been asking you all the questions, so you time to turn the tables and seek your revenge if you wish.
So what do you think, Imran, about the optimal business model that a digital health company should take?
I think, you know, it's almost a repeat of what you said. I think, you know, it's interesting, right? You've got people who have been very focused in getting employer coverage through insurers, etc., trying to sell through employee benefits. You've seen some people do that pretty well. I think Quit Genius were one of the first who really got in under the radar of doing smoking cessation, using a CBT in an app, and they got some great traction. And I think they dodged the bullet of a lot of people taking a very convoluted and complex approach to the market, you know, the prescription digital therapeutic route. So that services route with very quick coverage and reimbursement through employers, I think was quite a good way of going about it. I don't know if that lends to natural scale, though, because actually, some of you may have noticed they've rebranded to Palago, and they're now going to the substance use disorder space, broadening out, trying to get reimbursement direct from payers. So I think that's almost your example of they've tried one commercial route, they've got to a scale, and now they're trying to get into even greater scale by flipping into a broader space. The other dynamic I've seen is management companies who've had experience as bricks and mortar providers coming out of that setting saying, we're going to do something in digital, right? So they know all the operating standards, they know the governance that's required, they know how to get state-by-state licensing, and they've got all the payer relationships, and they know the pain points the payers have, and I think that's quite a smart move. There are a few companies out there that are doing that and have got what looks like quite formidable traction. I may or may not be an investor in one of them, so that's something I've seen. And the people I think I'm most worried about, and I think this came up in the panel previously, is a lot of the people doing very, call it low-level, consumer-grade anxiety, depression management, where there's just not enough substance or depth there. And they're the ones I think are going to probably burn out of the space and probably not have a great future ahead of them. So I think, you know, it comes down to those who are forging their way to get the deepest possible links into the healthcare system through, you know, payer reimbursement and working alongside providers. So the example I was alluding to, they've got in a position where the payers that they have coverage with are now using them as the primary point of triage for all their patients. So they do the triage, they hold on to the patients they can serve, and if they can't, they then pass them on to other providers, the typical very high acuity patients who need inpatient care. And I think that's quite a smart way of doing that. But yeah, that was my own personal experience. Others may see something else.
I had another question.
Oh God, okay. I'm going to regret this,
No.
but okay.
I'm just curious what the panel thinks around the markets to go to scale. So I flagged that for us, we typically look to prove out in our home market, the UK, and then look to the US to scale. But we're seeing some of the changes in Germany, some of the changes now being brought in France and Belgium. Is that changing the panelists' thinking? It's making me pause and consider. I was just curious about everybody else.
Maybe I can speak to that. We have one of our portfolio companies. It's actually a DIGA listed company, or about to be finally listed in the reimbursement scheme in Germany. It's a company called CaraCare, developing a digital IBS treatment. And it's interesting how, I mean, first of all, how this whole market has evolved in the last 3-4 years. And even with the availability of these reimbursement schemes for these kind of products, that they really prove that they can have an impact on patients, prescribers are not so keen on making available this kind of therapies that might even complement some pharmacological treatments that are available to patients. It's something that it's still kind of, obviously it needs some time probably for everybody to adopt it. But I think it's good that this kind of political decisions or strategies happen across Europe. But at the end of the day, companies with an aim of scale, they still look at the US as the principal market to go to for, I would say, ROI probably of investment in scaling, and the capacity of just by taking one model, it can help you get into many, many different patients or users. No? So it's complicated. I would like to see a bit more of effort, political efforts in this regard, into trying to kind of find ways to make things a bit more widely spread within Europe and more synergistic. But I think we're still some years from that to happen.
So I completely agree with Guillem, but as a fund, we try to, or we have our vision is that the healthcare sector of 10 years from now is completely different than from what we're seeing today. And we have DIGA, we have Brussels, France, many countries. I mean, in the UK, there's already some regulation for digital solutions, US as well. They are trying, and it's good, and they might not have the traction expected. They will improve for sure. They will iterate. But I'm sure, I mean, the guys who are going to have our constant monitoring through our watches, through the way we write emails or the way we post images are other guys that we're not contemplating. And these are the tech guys. These are the ones that are already have our digital biomarkers. And these guys are going to redefine healthcare in a way that we just don't imagine yet. And I think we're going to talk about, just speaking of mental health, now we have an image of mental health from the clinical point of view, right? From the illness that can be diagnosed, such as depression, anxiety, or if you want other cognitive diseases. But we're going to see other new diseases that might not need a doctor involved, which are social isolation, for example, which is a huge illness. And as a matter of an example, social isolation, someone over 50 years old with social isolation has 4 times more likelihood to have a stroke than a healthy person. This is exactly the same increase as someone who smokes 15 cigarettes. So it's a huge disease. We're just not recognizing it from the formal healthcare point of view. So answering back to your question, which market are we looking? Of course, we are in the very short term. We are looking very closely those markets that are trying to implement whatever is closer to reimbursement, but we don't think that this will be the final solution. So we are looking at traction, at longitudinal data, at companies that are able to capture patients that are treated like consumers rather than just patients.
Yeah. Great. Well, look, thank you so much for all of your insights and being so candid in the discussion. We have time for a question from the audience. That's a fantastic question. And for those who didn't hear, the question was about how do you reduce attrition effectively in the use of apps? People are very quick to download them, play with them, but not necessarily keep engaged. And I don't know whether, Heather, you can see you reaching with Michael, Javier, perhaps?
No, I think that's a fantastic question. I think even more important because some of the business models we're now seeing coming through, you only get paid per engaged user. And so being able to have a UX, UI that is really appealing and to hook patients is super important. What we're seeing now is companies taking some of the, the know-how from Apple and other consumer companies and actually applying that to the whole product experience. And that's what's driving the engagement. But I think it's really hard for companies that have come from this from a really clinical perspective because they feel they've got a product that works clinically in a clinical trial setting. But when it goes into the real world, it's just not what a patient wants to do every day. And so jumping that chasm between a clinical trial product into a consumer-facing product is one I think that drives success, but it's not easy to do.
And to add to that, you have a clinical validation based on product A. Society evolves. UX or user experience or whatever evolves as well. So then the clinical trial that you conducted with product A is different on product B because you have evolved the UI. So you need to go through all the, it's an infinite cycle. So an excellent question. I don't have an answer at least, but it's definitely an excellent question. But by the way. We've seen that in pharma companies as well, adherence, it's called adherence in pharmacological, right? In digital products, we see the same, right? So it's not just our problem, I'd say. It's a problem across all different places, right? So.
Fantastic. I don't know if we have time for one more question. There's a gentleman at the front. Yeah, please feel free to ask a question. So the question for those who didn't hear was whether there's room for innovation around the treatment of addiction.
I think, Xavi, now is the time to sell XR Health to the world.
So it's a very good question. Addiction is a very complex problem, right? And you need to face it in a lot of different ways. For example, virtual reality is a very good technology to actually help on craving, right? Addiction is not just now I have a problem. It's like once I have that need of and virtual reality is a very good example there. But addiction is a very complex problem. It's not just the problem. The addiction problem is also your environment, right? Friends, family, whatever. So you need to target that from a lot of different aspects. Specifically in digital health, I think we all have smartphones in our pockets, right? So I think digital can help you in a lot of different ways. On a very regular basis, you have it in your pocket, some kind of a help, right? And going to what my lead investor asked me to do, I think virtual reality is a very good solution for craving, which is one of the process that you need to follow, right? But it's a very, very complicated problem, and it needs to be targeted from a lot of different aspects, social, behavioral, a lot of different aspects.
Great. So finally, thank you very much for all of your engagement, both the audience and the panel, and we'll hand over to the LSI team. Thanks very much.